Lucien Vale leaned against his car in the parking lot of one of his own fast food locations, staring at the glowing sign. It was late afternoon, and the place was buzzing with drive-through orders and walk-in customers. On paper, his business was thriving. 10 stores across the region, steady profits, and a loyal customer base. But lately, the complaints had started piling up. Customers had written about rude employees, slow service, and orders being wrong more often than not. Lucien's gut told him something was off. He'd built this business from scratch, but as the CEO, he now spent most of his time in meetings, reviewing reports and strategizing growth. He hadn't set foot in one of his stores in over a year, and most of the team members had never even met him. It was a corporate chain now, with managers running the day-to-day operations. He realized he had no idea what was really happening on the ground. Ditching his usual polished suit for a pair of faded jeans, a hoodie, and a baseball cap, Lucien had gone full undercover. His usually clean-shaven face was hidden behind a scruffy beard he'd been growing for weeks. He looked nothing like the sharp, confident CEO his employees had seen in the occasional corporate memo. To them, he'd just be another customer. Tugging the cap lower over his eyes, Lucien walked into the restaurant. The place smelled like fried chicken and French fries, but the energy felt off. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Saria, barely glanced at him as he approached the counter. "Welcome," she muttered flatly, not bothering to smile. "Hi," Lucien said casually. "Can I get a number 3 combo extra sauce?" Saria punched it into the register without looking up. "That's $8.99. Lucien handed her a $10 bill, but before she could give him his change, a loud voice boomed from the back. "Saria, hurry it up. You're slower than a sloth in winter." Lucien's head snapped toward the kitchen. A man, probably in his mid-30s, wearing a manager's uniform, was glaring at Saria. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had an air of arrogance that immediately rubbed Lucien the wrong way. Saria's cheeks flushed red as she fumbled with the cash drawer. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "Sorry doesn't cut it," the man barked. "You're lucky I haven't fired you yet. God knows why I even keep you around." Lucien felt his stomach tighten. The way the manager spoke to Saria was beyond unprofessional. It was humiliating. Saria handed Lucien his change with trembling hands, avoiding eye contact. "Are you okay?" Lucien asked quietly, but Saria just nodded and hurried off to bag another order. As Lucien stepped aside to wait for his food, the manager sauntered up to the counter. "Hey, buddy," he said to Lucien, forcing a grin. "Sorry about the wait. You know how hard it is to get good help these days." Lucien raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. Before he could say anything, the manager leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, Saria's a lost cause, always messing up orders, dragging her feet. But corporate won't let me fire her. Something about needing to keep diversity numbers up." He rolled his eyes. Lucien's heart dropped. The casual cruelty of the statement hit him like a punch to the gut. Saria wasn't just being berated. She was being dismissed as though she were nothing more than a statistic. Lucien kept his voice steady, though it took effort. "Isn't it your job to train her if she's struggling?" The manager snorted. "Train her? I don't have time to babysit. Anyway, enjoy your meal, buddy." He slapped the counter and walked off, leaving Lucien seething. As Lucien sat down to eat, he noticed more troubling things. Saria was the only one cleaning tables, running orders, and handling the register, while other employees stood around chatting. Customers grew visibly frustrated at the slow service, but no one seemed to care, except for Saria, who kept her head down and worked tirelessly despite the constant criticism. Lucien decided to stick around for a bit longer. He watched Saria handle a rude customer with patience and saw her apologize profusely when an order was delayed, even though it wasn't her fault. She clearly cared about her job and the customers, but she was being treated like dirt. The final straw came when Saria accidentally dropped a tray of food. The manager stormed over, yelling loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. "Are you completely useless? You're costing me money." Saria looked close to tears but bent down to clean up the mess without saying a word. Lucian couldn't take it anymore. His hands clenched into fists as he wrestled with his emotions. He had come here to observe, but what he'd seen was worse than he could have imagined. It wasn't just bad service, it was a toxic environment. He knew he couldn't walk out of there without doing something. Lucian stood abruptly, leaving his tray of half-eaten food behind. He didn't have a plan yet, but he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. He walked toward the counter, where the manager was now leaning against the soda machine, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. The sight only made Lucian angrier. Saria was still crouched on the floor, picking up the scattered food, her movements slow and hesitant. A couple of customers glanced at her sympathetically, but no one stepped in. Lucian couldn't shake the image of her red, tear-filled eyes. "Hey," Lucian said, his voice sharp as he approached the manager. The man looked up, clearly startled. "Yeah, what's up? You're the manager here, right?" Lucian asked, keeping his tone calm but firm. "Yeah, that's me," he replied, puffing out his chest slightly. "Why? Is there a problem?" Lucian gestured toward Saria, who was still cleaning the floor. "That's the problem. The way you've been treating her." The manager's expression darkened. "Look, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but this is none of your business. She's my employee, and I'll handle her how I see fit." Lucian took a step closer, lowering his voice so only the manager could hear. "It is my business when someone is humiliated in front of a room full of people. Do you think that's leadership?" The manager blinked, momentarily caught off guard by Lucian's intensity, but he quickly recovered, smirking. "What are you, some kind of corporate watchdog? Go finish your fries and let me do my job." Lucian clenched his jaw but said nothing. He knew confronting the manager outright as a customer wouldn't accomplish much. He needed to see more to understand how deep the issues ran. He turned and walked out of the restaurant, but not before catching Saria's eye. She looked up briefly, her face etched with exhaustion and embarrassment, but she quickly returned to her task. Lucian made a mental note to speak with her later under different circumstances. The next day, Lucian returned to the same location, this time in an even deeper disguise. He wore a food delivery driver's uniform, complete with a branded cap and thermal bag, a role he knew would allow him to move freely through the restaurant without drawing too much attention. As he entered, he caught the manager, whose name tag read Torin, yelling at another employee, a teenager who looked no older than 16. The boy was struggling to carry a large box of frozen food into the back room. "Come on, Zane, what are you, a toddler? Use your legs," Torin barked, shaking his head in frustration. Zane mumbled an apology, his face red with exertion. Torin muttered something under his breath and walked off. Lucian approached Zane as he placed the box down with a heavy thud. "Hey, kid, you okay?" Zane glanced up, startled. Yeah, I'm fine. Just trying to keep up, you know? Is he always like that?" Lucian asked, nodding toward Torin, who was now chatting with another employee. Zane hesitated, then shrugged. "Pretty much. He's worse when the store's busy, but I need the job, so I just deal with it." Lucian's chest tightened. He thanked Zane and made his way to the back, where Saria was restocking shelves. She looked up as he entered, her face lighting up with faint recognition. "Hey," Lucian said softly. "You're Saria, right?" She nodded, looking wary. "Yeah. Can I help you? I was in here yesterday. I saw how Torin treated you," Lucian began. "Has it always been like that?" Saria's eyes darted to the door, as if expecting Torin to burst in at any moment. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I just do my job and try to stay out of his way." "You shouldn't have to work under those conditions," Lucian said firmly. Saria sighed. "It's not just me. He's hard on everyone. But people need the hours, so we don't say anything. It's not like corporate cares." Lucian felt a pang of guilt. He was corporate, and he hadn't had a clue what was happening in his own stores. He nodded, his mind racing. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I promise things are going to change." Saria gave him a skeptical look but didn't respond. Later that evening, Lucien sat in his car, scribbling notes on a legal pad. He'd seen enough to know that the problems weren't limited to Torin. The entire store seemed to operate under a culture of fear and indifference, with employees too afraid to speak up and management too complacent to care. He decided it was time to reveal himself. The next morning, Lucien arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual, dressed in his typical business attire. He entered the store and asked to speak with the manager. Torin appeared a few minutes later, clearly annoyed. "Can I help you?" Lucien extended his hand. "Lucien Vale, CEO." Torin's face paled, his eyes darting to the door as if considering an escape route, but he quickly forced a smile. "Oh wow, Mr. Vale, what a surprise. Let's talk in the office," Lucien said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Inside the cramped office, Lucien didn't waste any time. "I came here undercover this week and saw firsthand how you treat your team. It's unacceptable." Torin stammered, trying to defend himself. I was just trying to keep things running smoothly. You know how hard it is to find good workers these days." Lucien held up a hand to silence him. "Stop. I've seen enough. You don't respect your employees, and that reflects poorly on this company. Effective immediately, you're terminated." Torin's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but he didn't argue. He knew there was no point. After Torin left, Lucien gathered the staff in the dining area. Saria, Zane, and the rest of the team looked confused but curious. "I'm Lucien Vale, the CEO of this company," he began. "This week, I went undercover to see what was really happening in my stores. What I saw here was unacceptable. No one should feel disrespected or undervalued at their job." He turned to Saria. "Saria, your work ethic and dedication haven't gone unnoticed. From today forward, you'll be promoted to shift supervisor, with a pay raise to match." Saria's eyes widened. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "Completely," Lucien said with a smile. He continued, addressing the rest of the team. "Changes are coming. You'll all receive proper training, better schedules, and a safe environment to work in. And if anyone ever feels mistreated, my door is always open." The room erupted into applause, and Saria wiped away tears of relief. As Lucien left the store that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about profits, it was about people, and he would make sure no one in his company ever felt invisible again. Lucien walked out of the restaurant, the applause from the staff still faintly ringing in his ears. The weight of his decision to fire Torin and the promises he had made to the team churned in his chest. His mind raced as he climbed into his car. He knew the hard part wasn't over. It was just beginning. Fixing one store meant little if the problems were systemic. Torin wasn't the disease, he was a symptom. By noon, Lucien was back at his office, flipping through the weekly reports for all the locations. The complaints weren't isolated to that one store. Similar feedback had cropped up from other locations. Long waits, rude employees, and high turnover rates were common themes. He scribbled notes furiously, his frustration building. How had he missed this? A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. It was Maris, his operations director, someone he trusted to oversee the stores. She looked hesitant as she stepped inside. "You asked for me?" she said, glancing at the stack of papers on his desk. Lucien folded his hands. "We need to talk about what's happening in the stores. I just spent the last week undercover at one of them." Maris's eyes widened. "Undercover?" "Yes," Lucien said, his tone sharp. "And what I saw was unacceptable. Employees being mistreated, managers abusing their power, and a complete breakdown of the culture I thought we'd built. How did it get this bad without anyone flagging it to me?" Maris shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't aware it was that bad. I visit the stores regularly, and the managers always assure me things are running smoothly. I guess I relied too much on their word." "That's part of the problem," Lucien said, his voice softening slightly. "We've created too many layers between leadership and the people on the ground. I let myself get disconnected, and that's on me. But now we need to fix it." Maris nodded, her expression serious. "What's the plan?" Lucien leaned back in his chair, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. First, I'm meeting with every manager personally over the next 2 weeks. Not just to hear their side, but to make sure they understand the standards I expect. Second, I want an anonymous feedback system for employees, something they can use without fear of retaliation. That's a good start, Maris said. But what about the immediate issues in the stores? You can't be everywhere at once. I'm promoting Saria to interim manager at the store I visited, Lucien said. She's proven she's capable and cares about the team. I'll also send in a support team to help her stabilize things. As for the other stores, we need to identify more employees like her. People who are doing great work but aren't being recognized. Maris hesitated. And the managers who aren't cutting it? Lucien's jaw tightened. They'll either step up or step out. A week later, Lucien returned to the same restaurant unannounced. The atmosphere was noticeably different. Saria, now wearing a manager's uniform, was at the counter, taking orders with a calm yet confident demeanor. The staff moved with more purpose, and even the customers seemed more at ease. Lucien watched from a corner booth as Saria approached Zane, who was wiping down tables. "Hey, Zane," she said, her voice kind but firm. "You're doing a great job keeping the dining area clean. Can you help in the kitchen for a bit? They're short-staffed." Zane nodded eagerly. "Sure thing, Saria." Lucien couldn't help but smile. Saria was a natural leader. She wasn't just giving orders. She was earning respect. After a while, Saria spotted Lucien and walked over, her expression cautious. "Mr. Vale, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to check in," Lucien said. "How's it going?" Saria hesitated, then smiled. "It's better. People are trying harder, and the team feels more united. But it's not perfect yet. There's still a lot to fix." Lucien nodded. "That's honest, and that's all I can ask for. I'm proud of the work you're doing here, Saria. Keep it up." Before she could respond, a customer at the counter called out, "Excuse me, my order's missing fries." Saria immediately turned toward the counter. "I'll handle it," she said, excusing herself with a quick nod. Lucien watched her go, his chest swelling with a mix of pride and determination. This was just the beginning, but it was proof that even small changes could ripple outward. By the end of the 2 weeks, Lucien had visited 6 of the company's 10 locations. He'd met managers who were thriving and others who were barely scraping by. He'd listened to employees share stories of unfair treatment, lack of recognition, and burnout. And he'd started implementing changes. Mandatory leadership training, better scheduling practices, and a new reward system for employees who went above and beyond. One evening, as Lucien sat in his office reviewing the latest feedback from the anonymous system, a message caught his eye. "Thank you for listening. For the first time in years, it feels like someone at the top actually cares." Lucien leaned back in his chair, the words echoing in his mind. He wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was steering the company in the right direction. He picked up his phone and dialed Saria's number, which he'd gotten during their last meeting. "Hello?" she answered, her voice hesitant. "Saria, it's Lucien," he said. "I just wanted to let you know you're doing an incredible job. And I've been thinking, after your interim period as manager ends, I'd like to make it permanent. What do you think?" There was a long pause, and then Saria's voice broke slightly. I'd be honored. Thank you, Mr. Vale." "Thank you," Lucien said, "for showing me what leadership really looks like." As he hung up, Lucien felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about saving a company, it was about building one he could be proud of, and he wasn't about to let that slip away again. 3 months later, Lucien stood at a podium in the company's training center, facing a room packed with managers from all 10 locations. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation. This meeting wasn't optional, he had made that clear. Every manager was required to attend the first leadership summit since the Undercover operation that had shaken the company to its core. Behind him, a screen displayed 2 words in bold letters: "Reset Culture." Lucien gripped the edges of the podium, scanning the room. Some faces looked eager, others guarded. A few managers avoided his gaze entirely. Among them, he recognized those he'd identified as weak links during his visits, managers who had been warned, placed on probation, or given direct feedback to improve. This was their moment to prove they were serious about change. "Thank you all for being here," Lucien began, his voice calm but firm. "When I started this company, I believed we could build something special. Not just a place customers love, but a workplace people are proud to be part of. Somewhere that values every person who walks through the door, whether they're here to eat or to work." He paused, letting the words settle. "But somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. I lost sight of that." The room was dead silent. "3 months ago, I went undercover in one of our stores," he continued. "What I saw was unacceptable. Toxic behavior from leadership, employees overworked, disrespected, and ignored, customers frustrated, culture broken." A murmur rippled through the room, but Lucien raised his hand to quiet it. "I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to fix it. But fixing it starts with accountability, from me and from every single person in this room." Lucien clicked a button on the podium, and the screen behind him changed to a list of initiatives already underway. Anonymous feedback system implemented, mandatory leadership training completed by 70% of managers, employee recognition program launched, employee satisfaction surveys showing a 30% improvement. "These aren't just numbers," Lucien continued. "These are steps toward rebuilding trust. But this isn't the finish line. It's the starting point." He turned his gaze to the room's back corner, where Saria sat beside Maris. Saria's promotion to permanent manager had been one of the most celebrated changes, and she had quickly become a beacon of what good leadership could look like. Lucien had invited her to speak today, and though she'd been nervous, she'd agreed. "Saria," Lucien said with a small nod. Saria stood, adjusting her blazer. A far cry from the uniform she'd worn the first time Lucien met her. She stepped up to the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice steadying as she spoke. "I used to be a cashier at one of our stores. For a long time, I felt invisible. I worked hard, but it didn't seem to matter. My manager, well, let's just say he made me feel like I didn't belong." Several managers shifted in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. "But then someone gave me a chance. Someone listened. And now I'm here, managing the same store where I used to feel invisible. And I can tell you this, the changes we're making, they're real. My team knows it, my customers know it, and I hope you'll all go back to your stores and make them feel it too." The room erupted in applause. Saria glanced at Lucien, and he gave her an encouraging smile as she returned to her seat. Once the applause died down, Lucien stepped back up. "Saria's story is proof that change is possible. But it's not automatic. It takes work and it takes leadership. That's where you come in." He let the weight of his words hang in the air. "Over the next 6 months, every store will undergo a full review, from customer service to employee satisfaction. Managers who meet the new standards will be rewarded. Those who don't—" He let the sentence trail off, his meaning clear. Later that afternoon, after the summit ended, Lucien stayed behind to speak one-on-one with a few managers who had requested time with him. One of them was Zane, not the young employee from Saria's store, but a manager Lucien had flagged during his visits for his abrasive leadership style. Zane had narrowly avoided termination after agreeing to a probationary period and leadership coaching. "Mr. Vale," Zane said, stepping into the room with a sheepish expression. "Zane," Lucien replied, gesturing for him to sit. "What's on your mind?" Zane hesitated, then sighed. "I wanted to thank you for not giving up on me. After you visited my store, I realized I wasn't the manager I thought I was. I've been working on it and I think things are getting better. But I wanted to ask, how do I keep improving? How do I make sure I don't slip back into old habits?" Lucien leaned forward, his expression softening. "The fact that you're asking that question is a good sign. The key is listening to your team, to your customers, and to yourself. Don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being accountable." Zane nodded slowly, his shoulders relaxing. Thank you. I'll keep working on it. As Zane left, Lucien glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7 p.m., but the day's work wasn't done. He picked up his phone and opened the company's new feedback app. Each store had its own channel where employees could submit suggestions, report issues, or share positive experiences. Scrolling through, one message caught his eye. Saria is the best manager we've ever had. She actually listens to us and makes us feel valued. Thank you for promoting her. It's made all the difference. Lucien smiled, his chest swelling with pride. This wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about building something stronger. For the first time in years, he felt like he truly understood his company again, and he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers.